First of all, I'd like to offer a million times my dhanavats to everybody who's assembled here in love for Brahmananda, including our sannyasis, our adhikaris, brahmacharis, and our devadasis for attending this function. This shows the love that you had for Brahmananda. Even if you didn't have any interactions with him, you were inspired by his services to Srila Prabhupada, his unalloyed, unflinching service. So thank you very much for coming to this function. There's many people here who helped with this, not only this function, but during the time of crisis when Brahmananda unexpectedly passed. And I'd like to offer my respects to His Holiness Gopal Krishna Maharaj. Unfortunately, he's ill in Delhi with some cold and could not attend. But he did great amounts of service to Brahmananda during a time of crisis and led the kirtan in Brahmananda's room when Brahmananda passed. I'd like to offer my respects to Sarangi Thakur and Dharmatma for handling all the legal problems during this time, because I was in another world of grief because of the unexpected passing of my brother, Brahmananda. There are also innumerable other persons in the background who did so many things. There was Parvati, who arranged for this function and for the building of this. There's Panchagoda, who's the man in charge of this whole thing. I'd like to offer my respects to him. And there was Mahadevi, who was serving as Brahmananda's nurse practically for 2 or 3 years, always seeing that he was in fine health, and even massaging his legs when he was ill just before he passed. So all of these people I'd like to thank from the bottom of my heart for all the services they performed to Brahmananda. This is what we call bhakti. This is what Prabhupada taught us, that we're one happy family, and we should treat each other in that respect. And I can see here today the family spirit is existing in ISKCON, even after the 40 years that Prabhupada has left our planet, but he is actually here in sound. Prabhupada said that sound is life. I would just like to read one small item of Brahmananda's first Vyasa Puja offering that was done in 1969, just to show his devotion even at that time, in 1969, when we held the first Vyasa Puja offering to Srila Prabhupada. Brahmananda: no one can claim to have wasted years wandering after such dirty things as I. No one else's mind is so easily attracted by the promise of sense indulgence. No one is as forgetful as I, yet His divine grace has accepted me as a servant. Not even my mother has given me Krishna's holy name to always chant, nor has my father taught me who I am and what the purpose of life is, and who God is. His divine grace has enlisted me in the transcendental loving service to Krishna instead of the service of Maya. No one else in the world could have done this. That is a fact. Therefore I pray to the mercy of Lord Nityananda that I may spend every remaining moment of this life informing everyone I meet that His divine grace meets all the requirements stated in the scriptures and by great authorities to be the spiritual master of every living entity of this universe, Brahmananda, And then he quotes, "Whatsoever action is performed by great men, common men will follow in his footsteps. And whatever standards he sets by exemplary acts, all the world pursues." So this is Brahmananda's realization. Even at that time, in 1969, he recognized Prabhupada as the most advanced spiritual guidance of that day. Even one time somebody asked Prabhupada, "How many other people like you are in the world?" And Prabhupada said, "Maybe one or two." So we know one was Vedavyas because he's still in the Himalayas. We don't know who the other one is. But anyway, Brahmananda was the first one. It was asked actually at a news conference where a newsman asked Prabhupada, "Who was the first person to join your movement?" And Prabhupada replied, "Brahmananda." However, Kirtanananda was sitting there, and he said, "No, Prabhupada, it was me." So Prabhupada closed his eyes and said, "Yes, Kirtan comes before Brahman." He said, "Yes, Kirtan comes before Brahman." But Brahmananda was the first because he was the first to take responsibility. That's why Prabhupada said those words, because he said, "When Brahmananda came, my financial difficulties were solved." And what were those difficulties? Well, it was Mukunda who found the storefront and the little apartment behind the storefront for Prabhupada. And Prabhupada had $200 only. And that would just cover 1 month's rent for those two places. So he took a big risk without thinking where the rest of the money would come, having no disciples and very few followers who were just donating $10 or $20 at a time. So when Brahmananda came, he had a job with the New York City public school system as a substitute teacher. And he mostly worked in a Catholic school. And when he would go to the school, he had a shaved head with a tiny little sika. And the principal asked him, "Why is your head is shaved?" He said, "Oh, I have a skin infection." So, because in those days, of course, it's a fashion now to have a shaved head. But in the 60s, you were considered to be a weirdo if you had a shaved head. So Brahmananda would get paid and give his entire paycheck, which was about $400 a month, to Srila Prabhupada, who covered the expense of the apartment, the utilities, and everything. So even he would ask Prabhupada every morning for 25 cents so he could take the subway to his job, because he didn't keep any money. He gave the entire check to the society without keeping anything for himself. So from the very beginning, he did not think of himself, but always thought for Prabhupada's welfare and to support Prabhupada's movement in the beginning. And he took responsibility at the time when Prabhupada had his stroke, when he was paralyzed in his left side and blind in his left eye. Nobody knew what to do, but immediately Brahmananda jumped to the leadership and knew exactly what to do. By calling different doctors, it was Memorial Weekend, there was nobody around, but we got one doctor who came, and he took analysis of Srila Prabhupada and came out of the room, and we were all waiting. What is the analysis? What is the problem with Srila Prabhupada? And the doctor said, the old man is praying too much. he has to get out and walk. And that's when Prabhupada really started his brisk, and I mean brisk, morning walks. We couldn't keep up with him. In fact, those of you who had the opportunity to walk with Srila Prabhupada in those days, when we came back from those walks, we would all go back to bed. But Prabhupada didn't, because we were tired out. So these morning walks were very brisk, and they helped Srila Prabhupada's health greatly. So although the man was, you might say insulting, Prabhupada took his advice very seriously, and he started the walks in New York, where we would walk to the East Side River and come back. And sometimes we would walk up 2nd Avenue. So in this way, we had to, though, send Prabhupada by ambulance. Brahmananda arranged for the ambulance to go to Beth Israel Hospital to stabilize him and see what the after effects, because when you have that type of a heart attack, you have some after effects almost in every case, and we had to see what the after effects might have been. So he was stabilized at Beth Israel, but then he was normalized from our massaging. Prabhupada said the only cure for heart attack or stroke is massaging the heart and the whole body. So it was one day, it was my turn, I was 18 years old, and I was massaging Prabhupada's legs when a nurse came in and said, "Time for a test." And so Prabhupada asked, "Is there any needle?" And she said, no, there's no needle. So Prabhupada was put on a gurney, and I accompanied him in the elevator to the bottom of the basement of the hospital. And then there was a room separator, and this big nurse came out with a big needle. And Prabhupada looked at it and said, "No needle." So I had to imitate my brother Brahmananda and stand in front of the nurse, between Prabhupada and the nurse. And I said, "You have to go through me first." So she wasn't ready for that, and Prabhupada immediately motioned to me to take him back to his room. But I did not know where his room was. I forgot. I didn't know this was going to happen. So it took us 45 minutes to find the room. Prabhupada was sitting in a lotus position on the gurney and with his beads, and he would look in each room like this, looking for which room was him, and finally we found the room. Anyway, the next morning, Prabhupada insisted on leaving the hospital with the threats of all the doctors screaming at Brahmananda that you're going to kill the old man. But Brahmananda did not listen, and he took Prabhupada out of the hospital, saving him from those tests, which Prabhupada later told us they wanted to experiment on his brain. Why so many young people are following this conservative old man's movement. They wanted to understand why this was happening. So immediately when Brahmananda was having difficulty breathing heavily, although he had no temperature and he had no mucus, he was sitting upright but leaning forward. He had trouble breathing, and so he immediately stopped breathing and fell on the floor. And he sighed, there was a sigh of relief coming out of his mouth, his last breath. So immediately Prabhupada came in my heart and said to me that you have saved me from the hospital in 1967. So I shall save you from the hospital. And Brahmananda took the auspicious time of passing away in his room, which Prabhupada said is the most auspicious way to die, is to die in your room where you do your bhajan and your work, not in a hospital. So this means the Guru Leela doesn't end. The Guru Kripa Leela keeps on going. And Brahmananda was saved from that. And after 2 hours of kirtan, a smile appeared on his face. Everybody noticed it and called me, but I couldn't see Brahmananda in that state. But finally, Mahadevi, she convinced me to look at his face, and sure enough, there was a smile. So then I knew he was at the place where he wanted to be, with Srila Prabhupada. So therefore, this day is a sad but also a happy day, because we know that Brahmananda, please come, give him a seat. He was with Brahmananda in Africa. Please come. Yogana Swami was with Brahmananda. Yes. Come sit down. Thank you for coming. So there's many devotees here that were with Brahmananda, who knew Brahmananda, or were inspired by his service. We're going to discuss those points more this evening at 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock at the Balaram Center, where I'll show a film of Brahmananda's memories of Srila Prabhupada and the stories he tells from his personal heart about Brahmananda. So this is just an introduction for me to thank everybody for coming, especially those who came a very long distance just for the love of Brahmananda, such as Swarup, who had to fly how many hours? 22 hours. He hasn't been in India since how long?
77.
Yeah, he was here in 77, so he came all this distance for Brahmananda. Let's give him a hand. There are many other devotees who also flew all this way just for Brahmananda. Although it's Kartik, everybody comes, but some came just for Brahmananda because of their love for him and his love for them. So I want to thank everybody. I also, now he's just arrived, is to yes, Dina Bandhu, I forget, I'm a little bit emotional, for Dina Bandhu for handling the ceremony of Brahmananda's passing away at the Jamuna. No, you did the lighting.
We did the lighting of the fire.
You did the light. You asked me, do I want to do it? I said, I can't burn my brother. You please do it. And you did all the prayers, and all the other, I think, ladies and people, they put the ghee all over Brahmananda. And I want to thank them for all this. I mean, there's innumerable people here who did so much for Brahmananda. I cannot count how many people, but I'm deeply, deeply indebted to all those people who served my brother in such a way. And I want to thank everybody to be inspired by Brahmananda's service. He had 6 months before he wrote his book called Swamiji. This picture comes from Swamiji. If you read this book, you will also get inspired, because everybody says it's the greatest love story they ever read. So thank you for coming, and I'll hand the mic over to our president.
Thank you, Gargamuni Prabhu. That's such an awesome